Morning light was just breaking over Ufa on October 11, 2025, when something unexpected happened. In the heart of Russia's Bashkortostan region, a massive refinery was running as per routine, its towers and pipes sipping crude and converting it into fuel day after day. It had never seemed like a battlefield, but on that dawn, engines miles away were already humming to cause nothing but harm. At 1:36 a.m. news broke. Long-range drones from Ukraine's security service, SBU, under its Alpha Special Operations Center, had struck the Bashneft UNPZ refinery. The facility sits about 1,400 kilometers from Ukraine's border, deep, dangerous, remote. The strike reportedly hit near ELO UAVT-6, a key crude oil processing unit. Thick black smoke gathered over the complex. Emergency crews rushed in. Local media showed columns of fire. Ufa's airport was briefly disrupted. This was not a random hit. It was the third deep strike inside Bashkortostan within a month. For the SBU, it was proof of reach. They have made it clear that no facility is out of range. Russia's energy hubs, even the ones creating military hardware, are vulnerable. Earlier, Ukraine struck the Korobkovsky gas processing plant and the Yefimovka dispatch hub in the Volgograd region. Those operations hit en route pipelines, distorting supply chains and output. This time, the target was deeper, more central. The refinery in Ufa is not just an industrial plant. It is a pillar in Russia's fuel supply for its armed forces and domestic consumption. So how did Ukraine carry out a daytime strike so deep inside Russia? What tools, timing, and tactics made this possible? And how will Russia respond now that its rear areas can no longer hide? Let me walk you through the mission minute by minute and then show you what comes next in a war that now reaches into infrastructure and energy itself. They began weeks before the strike, not in a hangar, but behind computers and coffee cups. Analysts collected every map and photo they could find of the Bashneft site. Satellite pictures, public infrastructure maps, and even scraped images from contractor websites were used to redraw the refinery by hand. Who fed what to whom, where the big tanks sat, which pipes ran between units, and which buildings controlled pressure and flow. From that sketch, they circled the spots that would hurt the most if they stopped working. Valve junctions were gold, metering units were choke points, and power transformers were single points of failure. At the same time, SIGINT teams listened. They monitored refinery radio channels, automatic telemetry links, and field maintenance chatter. The goal was simple: find when the plant was most vulnerable. Signals showed patterns. The plant tended to run complete systems during certain hours. Guards shifted at predictable times. A local tip even said a maintenance crew would close a gate for a short test one morning. That kind of human detail was the hidden edge. It told planners when to move so that their drones would face fewer people and more machines. By early morning on October 11th, the plan was complete. The team picked approach paths, safe altitudes, and backup routes in case a radar caught them. They set abort rules so pilots could call it off if civilians were at risk. Legal officers ran quick models to check how far a blast could reach and whether a vapor cloud could drift toward nearby houses. That work led to the weapons they chose and the exact angle they would hit. The twist was this: planners did not only plan to destroy, they planned to break the refinery's brain. Hit the right control box, and entire systems would fail on their own, multiplying the effect without needing bigger explosions. At dawn, drones lifted off. Winged platforms with long endurance led the strike, while smaller FPV first-person view drones followed to execute precision support strikes on subsystems. Launch points were dispersed so no single site could be pinpointed easily. They threaded a route that hugged the ground. The drones stayed low, moving behind hills and along tree lines, so radar would see little more than a notch of sky. Planners timed the run to slip through the moments when local radar stations swept elsewhere. If the GPS stopped working, the drones did not panic. Built-in motion sensors kept them steady. Simple altimeters held their height, and cameras compared what they saw below with pictures they already had to keep them on track. Closer to Ufa, they slowed and sank lower to get a better look. Cameras and heat sensors switched on and started checking the scene against the reference photos the analysts had fed them. Roof lines, pipe layouts, and warm spots on equipment all had matches in the drone's memory. When everything lined up, the drones had the green light for the final run. At the refinery, the main target was LUAVT-6, a unit essential in converting crude oil into refined products. Disabling it would cripple throughput. Secondary targets included control kiosks, power feeders, valve junctions, and metering systems. The winged drones carried disruption warheads, aimed not to flatten the entire facility, but to punch holes that would bring systems down. FPV drones had lighter charges, collision tools, or small explosives to hit power nodes, control cabins, or telemetry racks. At the key moment, one drone struck the base of the ELOUAVT-6 module. The burst ruptured piping and set off a fuel fire. Another drone simultaneously struck a control feed line, collapsing a critical junction. Flames ripped outward. FPVs streamed in to knock out substations and electronic controls, making it harder to isolate damage or reroute functions. The attack didn't go completely unnoticed. Around mid-morning, radar operators in Bashkortostan noticed something odd. Tiny moving dots blinking on their screens for just a few seconds before disappearing. At first, they thought it was a glitch or maybe a flock of birds, but the signals were too smooth, too deliberate. Within minutes, alarms started to go off. Russian air defense units were quickly alerted. Soldiers rushed to man their guns and missile launchers around the industrial areas of Ufa. The first defensive shots lit up the sky, bright trails cutting through the air, trying to hit what they could barely see. But Ukraine's drones were ready for this. They weren't flying in straight lines. They were coming in waves, at different heights and speeds, making it nearly impossible for Russian gunners to track them all at once. One drone was hit and burst into sparks, crashing into an empty field near some houses. Another was damaged mid-air, losing part of its wing before falling into the forest. But most of them kept going. Whenever Russia's radar locked onto one, the drones adjusted automatically, dropping lower, changing direction, or slipping into radar blind spots that Ukraine had already mapped out. It turned into a battle of speed and accuracy. Russia had the weapons and radar, but Ukraine had the element of surprise and months of planning. By the time Russia fully realized what was happening, most of the drones were already too close to stop. The timing was tight. The strike was designed to land before full defense engagement could lock on. Russian systems that tried to respond did so after the key hits. The defenders scrambled to contain fires, but control systems were disrupted and power was severed in critical parts of the complex. Within moments, fires spread from the struck modules into nearby storage tanks, pipelines, and support buildings. Smoke towers rose. Access roads were blocked. Firefighters rushed in, but power cuts and secondary explosions slowed their advance. Control rooms lost connectivity. Automated systems shut down or misbehaved. Valves got stuck open or jammed. Backup generators were targeted by FPVs, reducing redundancy. Plant staff evacuated sections as temperatures soared. Nearby Ufa airport stalled operations temporarily. As smoke drifted, flights were disrupted. Residents nearer the refinery reported tremors, the smell of burning fuel, and thick plumes overhead. As the flames still glowed over Ufa, Kiev's intelligence teams got to work. They pored over satellite images showing burnt rooftops, twisted pipelines, and strange glowing heat spots. Every frame was compared with the original targets to see what the drones had actually hit. Civilian phone videos, dashcam footage, and even leaked clips from local news became part of the puzzle. When the pieces came together, something unexpected appeared. The drones hadn't just hit oil storage tanks, they had struck deep into the refinery's nervous system. Control buildings that housed automated valves, electric feed lines that regulated pressure, and precision meters that balanced chemical flows were all destroyed. One damaged node even showed signs of a growing power fault, meaning one hit might have triggered failures across several blocks of the plant. That is when analysts realized the strike wasn't about fire or destruction alone. It was on point. Ukraine's drones had gone for the brain, not the body. The exact systems Russia couldn't easily replace. Once the refining module was knocked offline, fuel output dropped. Russia's military and civilian consumers experienced bottlenecks. In the days that followed, pipelines serving the region had to reroute supply, stretch buffer stocks, and reduce deliveries. In response, Russian officials shuffled protective measures. Guard patrols expanded around other refiners, air defenses were redeployed, security perimeters were extended, and hardening projects were proposed for vulnerable nodes. Propaganda emerged, denying severe damage, claiming that the strike was contained and that output would resume quickly. Ukraine treated this strike as part of a broader campaign of kinetic sanctions, using physical strikes to pressure Russia's war infrastructure and economy. The message was clear: no refinery, no fuel hub, no matter how deep inside Russia, is safe. As the smoke cleared over Ufa, the damage began to tell a story. The blast zones were scorched, tanks were dented or ruptured, feed lines split, control buildings were burned out. Repair crews entering the complex found twisted metal, melted wiring, and crippled systems. Key control valves, metering units, and power distribution nodes were among the hardest hit, since these are not things you rebuild in days. Fuel production in the region dropped sharply. Russia's internal logistics felt the strain. Military units in nearby sectors reported tighter fuel allocations. Civilian fuel supplies were affected. Some trucks and stations had to wait longer, especially in remote areas tied to Ufa's refining network. Russia's leadership scrambled to respond. Officials delivered a steady flow of press statements denying the worst. Local authorities said the refinery would resume operations soon. Meanwhile, technicians began patching systems, rerouting power, and securing undamaged parts. Some proposals were made to move critical refining modules underground or behind reinforced shelters in the future. In diplomatic circles, the strike created more trouble than anyone expected. Russia formally protested to Ukraine and to global bodies, calling the strike a violation of sovereignty. Allies and observers debated whether energy infrastructure should be a legitimate military target. Meanwhile, Ukraine used the moment to reinforce its narrative that war infrastructure includes the energy backbone, and if you allow that backbone to operate unchecked, your war becomes fueled by impunity. For people in Ukraine, it felt like a victory. They now had one more proof that Russia's industrial rear areas are not invulnerable. For Russians, it was a shock. Even in daylight, deep inside their territory, critical infrastructure could burn. Guards, radars, and deep defenses now seemed less secure than before. As the afternoon fell on Bashkortostan, emergency crews were still fighting flames. Repair teams were staging their work. The public watched as smoke columns danced above the refinery towers, and behind the scenes, military planners in both capitals recalculated risk. But one question remained. Now that Ukraine had shown it could ignite fuel hubs deep inside Russia, which refinery or pipeline would be next?